Hello everyone, I'm Mohit Ul Alam and I'm going to speak on Shakespeare as today it is his 450th birth anniversary. So, with happy birthday to him, I would like to speak about some of the major issues that his plays and sonnets are concerned with. First of all, as Shakespeare lived under the regime of monarchs, first Queen Elizabeth and then King James the First. So it should be, I think, better to speak how Shakespeare looked at disposition of the kings in his plays. The kings in Shakespeare are never the happy group of people. Either they are murdering or they are being murdered. There seems to be no middle way. It looks like Shakespeare chose uh, to show that the destination for a king is always an early death. The oldest king in Shakespeare is King Lear. He is 80 years old, but then we see that in this last phase of his life, he has, by his own undoing, faced a kind of situation which he didn't ever dream of. And then, therefore, King Lear may be held responsible for the kind of drastic action he went for in trying to see which of his three daughters loved him the most. And in Shakespeare, this theme is often repeated that how would you know how much love is there in somebody for somebody else? This is an immeasurable kind of feeling and mysterious kind of thing. But Shakespeare's monarchs, particularly King Lear, seem to be confident that he must extract out this amount of feeling from each of his daughters. And his older two daughters, they knew how to placate the king, so they played to the tune and they flattered their father and said that as father and king, King Lear was matchless. He was very happy. He then gave away two big portions of his kingdom to these two daughters, Goneril and Regan. But as he came to his youngest daughter, Cordelia, then he was almost, you know, rebuffed immediately because Cordelia famously said, I love you as much I should, nothing more and nothing less. And King Lear was quite unready. At first, he didn't think that he heard her well. He asked her to repeat it, and Cordelia repeated the feeling that I love you as much as I should, nothing more and nothing less. And, and King Lear got furious, and the consequence was very bad, tragic, both for his daughter and for himself. In a similar way, when Othello was trying to extract what was really hiding in Iago's mind regarding uh, his idea that Desdemona probably was betraying Othello, and then Iago was very clever. He was a villain, and he hid behind certain uh, series of platitudes, saying that it was not possible for him to disclose his mind to Othello. And Othello said, I am commanding you, give out what is there inside your mouth, inside your mind. Then Iago said, almost in the same vein as Cordelia, that, my lord, you can physically dominate me, but you can never dominate on my mind. It is something that is exclusive for me. So in this way, you see, the incomprehensibility of the human mind is preserved well by Shakespeare in his treatment of the characters. And then King Lear in a way is modeled in a moralistic way. I mean, the morality tradition was very much vibrant during Shakespeare's time, and then though it was a culture of the bygone days, but still its legacy was very powerful uh, on the Elizabethan stage. So therefore, King Lear may be read as a morality play because the king chooses the bad daughters as against the good one, and therefore, because of his bad choice, he has to suffer, and through this suffering, he becomes enlightened. He realizes his mistake, and thereby he becomes a wiser man, though at the cost of his own life. This is what is the moral thing that Shakespeare draws up, that your action must produce certain results, and you will have to bear all those results or consequences. This is where Shakespeare is different from his Greek predecessors, uh, in whose plays the characters are often not responsible for the destinations they reach or meet with. But in Shakespeare, every character, particularly his tragic characters, they are definitely responsible for the consequences they meet with at the end of the day. So King Lear is like that, responsible for his own action. He suffered, and then he met with his death. And then uh, before King Lear, Shakespeare started writing tragedy with Julius Caesar, which he wrote in 1599. And Julius Caesar is a beautiful study in the psychology of a upcoming ruler, and also the psychology of a person who is going to oppose that kind of ruling. So Julius Caesar therefore is a play that shows, on the one hand, the hero Julius Caesar, who is emerging almost as a dictator, and against him is Brutus, who is opposing this idea, because Brutus thought that the the value of the Roman Republic is threatened by the rising of Julius Caesar. So he plotted that conspiracy, which ultimately caused Julius Caesar's death. But here, Shakespeare does not fall short of showing Brutus's mistake or blunder in thinking that the dominance of ideology is more important than the life of a human being. This is never going to be. So in Shakespeare, you will see that often when there is a conflict between an ideology and the life of an individual, Shakespeare is ready to give priority to the life of the individual over that of ideology. Say, for example, here Brutus has killed Julius Caesar because he thought that Julius Caesar was a threat to Roman democracy or Roman Republic. But by killing him, Brutus actually has given paved the passage for the Roman Empire to take shape, because the next person to come to rule after Julius Caesar is Octavius Caesar, and who became the first Roman emperor in the history of Rome. So, therefore, and Brutus didn't realize this very essential uh, issue that nothing, no ideology, or nothing in the name of an ideology can be held superior to the life of an individual human being. Time and again, Shakespeare is persistent about showing this to his readers. We can think about this rather, let us say, tragicomedy, measure for measure, which is also bringing up a similar idea where Angelo is now the delegated authority of Vienna. And then Angelo finds Claudio, a citizen, uh, having committed the crime of fornication. And according to the rule of law of Vienna, any young pair found having found committing fornication without marriage would be punishable by law. And the law was very strict on the man because he would lose his life, he would be executed. So Claudio therefore is caught by this newly revived law against fornication and he would be executed. But then Claudio's sister Isabel approaches Angelo uh, to seek mercy for her brother's life. But Angelo is very determined. He is renowned as a pious person, very virtuous man, it is said, whose blood doesn't flow, which means he is not affected by this normal, regular human passion. He is not moved by this emotion. He is only capable of understanding reason, logic. And therefore, Angelo says to Isabella that I have nothing to do here. It is the law that will take its own course. And if your brother, since your brother has been found guilty, he will be put to death. But Isabella then comes again. After being refused at the first time, she comes again with the same request. And Angelo still uh, denies her the favor and she comes for the third time. By this time, Shakespeare is portraying this character of Angelo by showing that the chemistry is now acting differently because Isabel is such a beautiful woman, pretty, very pretty, that Angelo has begun to melt in his position by being drawn by the beauty of Isabel. Now, Angelo is the keeper of law. He cannot deviate from this strict following of law, but at the same time, he cannot say uh, goodbye to his libido. And since he is the man in power, he thinks that he can probably, screw law. So what he does is in a way very offensive. He offers Isabella that she should be she should be favored with the life of her brother. That is, her brother would be saved only if only Isabella agrees to surrender herself to him. Which means, in other words, if Isabella agrees to lose her virginity to Angelo, then in return of that, Angelo would show mercy to her brother's life, Claudio. But Isabella, of course, doesn't agree. She is now confronted with a dilemma of choice. Choice between a brother's life and losing her own chastity. And I often ask my students when I teach them this play, what would be their option? Of course, the boy students they readily answered that yes, Isabella should sacrifice her chastity. But the female students they say no, no, our chastity is a greater thing to us than our brother's life. But there are exceptions. Anyway, uh, so here I am not going into discussing the whole play like that. But here the similarity between this position of Angelo and that of Brutus is that both Angelo and Brutus they have taken law by the letter, not by the spirit. So therefore Angelo thinks that the law must be followed, but there are two ways to interpret law. Whether law should be followed by the letter or by the spirit. Usually, in a general sense, when uh, the law office or the court passes a verdict, they actually pass the verdict not on the literal interpretation of law, but on the rather metaphorical interpretation of law. But Angelo is insisting on reading law by the letter. In English, there is a word for this kind of reading of law by the letter, which is known as casuistry. So here, Angelo is reading law by the letter, and thereby he couldn't see really the sympathy that he could show to Claudio because Claudio had committed the crime of fornication when the law was not active against it. So you cannot punish somebody for the crime uh, that had taken place before a law against it was implemented. So this is really the problem that Angelo ignores. So therefore, since it is a comedy measure for measure, Angelo finally is punished, but like Brutus, he doesn't lose his life. But the thing is there that law should be understood by the metaphorical significance, by the suggestiveness, by the connotative meanings it offers, not by the literal meanings. And then another great question Shakespeare uh, treated in his plays was the definition of the ruler. The age of Renaissance in which he was living, this age was vibrant with all kinds of new ideas. There had been already Machiavelli, then Montaigne, and in England, George Eliot, not George, Thomas Eliot, all of them, King James the First himself, all of them were very concerned about the ideal role of a ruler or who would be the ideal ruler. And we see that Shakespeare has questioned this, experimented with this question in plays after plays. And in his great tragedies, Hamlet, King Lear, we have already discussed, Hamlet, Macbeth, or even Julius Caesar or Coriolanus. In all these tragedies, Shakespeare has really tried to define and redefine the role of a ruler. What would be the best way to serve a society? What should be the role of a king? And King James himself was also concerned about this ideal role of a ruler. His book, Governor, no, no, not Governor, it is Decameron. No, it is Basilicon Doron. Basilicon Doron is a book he wrote in Latin, which also tries to define the role of a king in the kingdom. So, uh, in Hamlet, for example, we find Hamlet senior Hamlet, the king of Denmark, to be probably an ideal king. But as the play starts, the king is already a dead man. It is through Hamlet and through the ghost of King Hamlet that we come to know that the previous king was a virtuous king. But then uh, He was killed by his own younger brother, Claudius, because Claudius wanted to grab the throne by illegally disposing his brother from the throne. This is called usurpation. So Claudius is a usurper, and King Senior Hamlet is a usurped king. And then the the point here is that after the king died, he came to Hamlet in the form of a ghost, urging him to take revenge. So that is how the revenge tradition is so much alive in Shakespearean tragedy. In a revenge tragedy, revenge is always a retaliatory action. It is a second action. It is not the first action. So therefore, this Hamlet is now given this mandate to take revenge on his uncle by the ghost of his father. Now Hamlet is a Renaissance scholar. He is a Renaissance prince. He has already attended the University of Wittenberg, where in history, in a in historical fact, where Martin Luther, the leader of the Protestant Christianity, Martin Luther also taught there in that university for some time. So this University of Wittenberg was known for its liberal culture, and Hamlet therefore uh, derived enough, let us say, enough agnostic kind of philosophy, which made him unable to believe in a certain given belief. So when the ghost has asked him to take revenge, he is in a conflict here. How can he kill a human being, commit an act of homicide on Claudius just by the word of a spiritual ghost or an apparition? And he must therefore try to uh, prove the words of the ghost to see whether he had given him a true story or a false story. And to prove the ghost's words that Hamlet's father was uh, killed while he poisoned while he was sleeping in the orchard, and his younger brother came, Claudius, poured the poison through his ear holes. And this story, which was told to Hamlet by the ghost of his father, this story Hamlet reenacts in the play within the play. And when the performance took place, Claudius reacted to it, which was a proof enough that Claudius was actually the killer of his own brother. So there is now no reason why Hamlet should not take revenge on him, since he has got the proof. But to be or not to be, that is the question. Hamlet delays. Hamlet gets the chance, opportunity, doesn't kill the king, and finally he kills Claudius, which, according to many critics and also in my view, which he killed on the spur of the moment. I mean, if he had had time to think about it, probably he would not have gone ahead with this murder plan. Anyway, through this Hamlet, therefore, Shakespeare had almost put the revenge tradition on its head, upside down, because, as one French critic famously said, uh, his name is, oh, I forgot the name. His name is, okay, it will come to my mind. So, there he said that Hamlet is not a revenge play, rather a play against revenge. So, therefore, here, if Hamlet is now taken to be a play to understand Hamlet, Shakespeare's view of kingship, then we see that Shakespeare is rather in a confused state of mind. He neither does approve of a king like Senior Hamlet or a king like Claudius. Somebody different from both of them has to be the king. So he experiments with this idea again in Macbeth, and Macbeth is all bloodshed. It is probably the most violent play after Titus Andronicus, in which blood is like spilling like free water almost. And Macbeth is a general in Scotland, and Duncan is the king of Scotland. And Duncan is a very pious king, very widely respected, and also in a way popular. But in actual history, the actual Duncan was not that kind of pious or virtuous. But here, because of his dramatic necessity, Shakespeare turns him into a good king. And then now Macbeth has this ambition to become the king, latent in his constitution. So when he returns from a very important victory with his associate Banquo from the battlefield, they are met with by a group of witches or witch sisters, and the witches they make prophecies on the future of Macbeth as well as on that of Banquo. And the three witches. Oh, by the way, I must share this information with you that Rabindranath Tagore, that is Tagore, he translated these witch scenes in exactly rhymed version, so beautiful that I only regret the fact that why Tagore had not completed translating the whole play. Anyway, that is beside the point. So the witches tell Macbeth that he will become the Thane of Glamis, he will become the Thane of Cawdor, and he will become the king too. And Macbeth is surprised. Macbeth knows that he is the Thane of Glamis because his father was the Thane of Glamis. So he can become the Thane of Glamis. But then, how would he become the Thane of Cawdor? Cawdor is already living. But Macbeth didn't know that Cawdor has been executed because of betrayal. Cawdor betrayed the king and therefore he was put to execution, and his title is now given over to Macbeth. And then how would Macbeth become the king? The witches don't really suggest him the way. They only tell him about the prediction, give him the prediction. Now, Shakespeare beautifully shows how Macbeth himself becomes responsible by being influenced uh, with the prophecies of the witches, but at the same time, the responsibility is his own. It is Macbeth who decides upon the course of action to kill King Duncan. And who assists him here? His wife, Lady Macbeth. Lady Macbeth says that I am asking the evil powers to change my milk into poison and to change my female body into a male body so that I can assist my husband in getting this action done. What is this action? The murder of Duncan, regicide. Interesting enough, in this play, murder or regicide or killing the king, these words are never mentioned. But euphemistically, Shakespeare uses other words, less harmful words, to describe this violent action. Anyway, Macbeth kills Duncan with the help of his wife Laetitia, but after killing Duncan, his conscience begins to bite him, and then he sees himself or discovers himself in totally a different world because he thought after killing the king, he will become the king, his wife will become the queen. They have become king and queen, but what they have lost in the process is sleep. Sleep is the symbol of peace, and Macbeth says, my mind is full of scorpions. I cannot put my head to the pillow. My sleep is gone. So Macbeth's suffering starts. So here, therefore, Shakespeare, if we want to, I mean, there is no way that we should moralize on Shakespeare, but if we want to moralize it, if we want to say something from a moralistic point of view, then we have to say that here Shakespeare suggests that sin, usurpation, regicide, this never pay finally. So, this is how Shakespeare actually deals with kings and queens. In his history plays, Richard III is a villainous character. He is a predecessor of Macbeth in the path of blood, and he kills people after people. Nobody actually is spared from his hand. His own two innocent nephews, the children of Edward IV, his elder brother, he kills them in the Tower of London, in London Tower. And King Richard finally doesn't find peace. Just after 2 years of his illegal reign as usurper, killing his own brother, he then finds himself confronting Henry VII in the Battle of Bosworth in 1485. And Shakespeare writes this play beautifully, where King Richard III is portrayed as a king with a lame foot, but the way he advances in materializing his goal is awe-inspiring. Though Richard III is a villain, but he is an attractive villain. But probably more attractive as a villain is Iago in Othello. Oh my God, Iago is my most, you know, my most, let us say, my most adored character. Though he is a villain, he can manipulate human mind like anything. If you compare him with today's politicians, that these politicians will appear like children to him. Okay, so Iago, in a way, is an extreme version of Machiavellian truism that whatever you want to get, you must get it in order to reach your goal. And how you reach your goal is immaterial, is secondary as a question. Ends justify the means. So Machiavellianism is very much present in uh, Iago. That is, he he says one thing, means another thing. He utters something, does another thing. So in this way, until the last point, Othello cannot understand that he has all through been cheated by this Iago, who has always posed uh, as his best friend. And then, as we have said, this villain, uh, Machiavellianism, another good, very effective Machiavellian character is Henry the Fourth. Henry the Fourth is a wonderful play because Falstaff is there, and Henry the Fourth knows how to get ahead to achieve his goal, and therefore he uses sweet words. Uh, Hotspur, the character there, he says he is all discandy. Discandy means like chocolate sweet, like words. But then he deposes Richard II. This is another play where Henry the Fourth is the usurper, and Richard II, the virtuous king, is dethroned. And then again, the question comes back. Richard II was a very pious king, but at the same time, his defect was that he believed in the rule of primogeniture, meaning that he was anointed. He was an anointed king, and because of that uh, blessings from God, he will be protected against his enemies. So he was not really given to thinking about the military preparation that he would need to take to resist challenges like Henry IV or Bolingbroke at that play. But Richard II finally dies a heartbroken man. But again, here in this play, Shakespeare shows that it is not the usurper who is to be glorified, but it is Richard II who has lost the throne but who has emerged as a better human being. The speeches that Richard II makes uh, in the prison are beautiful speeches. Beautiful speeches. I wish I could read them all here. So, therefore, in this way, Shakespeare shows that even if a virtuous king is like Richard II, and if he does not mind his affairs of the state, then he might be likely to lose his power, throne, kingdom. And it is also shown in the comedies. For example, in As You Like It, Duke Senior is thrown out of the kingdom by his own brother Frederick. And in The Tempest, supposedly Shakespeare's last play, in The Tempest, Prospero is just driven out of his kingdom through a civil war instigated by his brother Antonio. And there, Prospero says very beautifully that I spend my hours in the library studying all this magic, including black magic, and I became indifferent to my affairs of the state. Taking advantage of this, my younger brother just toppled me from the throne. So here again Shakespeare means to say that there must be a blending between your practical world and your ideal world. This is what is best from Shakespeare. Like Aristotle, he has always advised to choose a middle way, not to go to an extreme. If somebody goes to an extreme, he is definitely to face, destructive consequences, bitter fortune. This has always been shown. So therefore, the Tempest is similar to Hamlet, As You Like It, uh, and there are other plays too where brother sibling rivalry, where brother is against brother, which actually comes from the biblical tradition. Abel and Cain, the two brothers. Abel, the good brother, was killed by Cain, the evil brother. Similarly, this repeats in Shakespeare's plays. And then uh, uh, love, love between man and woman is is great fun in the comedies, but is serious tragedy in the tragedies. For example, Desdemona and Othello, they are great lovers, but because Othello is coming from an outside culture, because of the cultural differences, it has been fed to him by Iago that you probably don't understand our women. They always do naughty things behind the back of their husbands. They are not afraid of God, but they are afraid of their husbands, so therefore they are deceptive. This cultural gap is responsible for making Othello think that his wife Desdemona is seeing another man in his absence or on the back of him. So therefore, out of this jealousy, he kills Desdemona. So here, love therefore has ended in tragedy. But if the same thing happens almost in A Midsummer Night's Dream, Aegeus the father is against his daughter's choice of Lysander because Aegeus thinks that uh, Demetrius should be the right choice for his daughter. But his daughter Hermia is like Cordelia, Hermia is like Cleopatra, Hermia is like Rosaline in As You Like It. Hermia is a emerging woman, a feminist with an independence of mind. Hermia says, no, I am going to uh, go for Lysander, not for Demetrius. So Aegeus takes the couple to the Duke. As much as in Othello, Brabantio comes to the Duke for a solution to his problem. And here, uh, the Duke urges Hermia to agree with her father because the Athenian law says that if a marriageable daughter does not conform or does not agree with her father on the question of marriage, she will have two options open. Either she would go to a nunnery, join a nunnery, and spend a sexless life, marriageless life all through, or she will be executed. Then Hermia says, beautiful. Hermia says, I wish my father could see Lysander with my eyes. That is, I wish that the way I have chosen Lysander, my father would have seen Lysander from my own perspective. This is a universal conflict, not only unique to A Midsummer Night's Dream. It is a universal theme that is also very much vibrant in Bangladesh. Almost in every second family, there is a conflict between the parents and the children regarding the choice of a husband or choice of a wife. So anyway, Lysander therefore says in that play that the course of true love never did run smooth. You understand? It comes from Greek classics, like Hercules had to win Omphale by winning all the challenges. And similarly here, Lysander has said that the passage of love is not a bed of roses, it is a bed of thorns. And time and again, Shakespeare proves this complicated passage of love in his love comedies as well as in his sonnets. So, in the other place, you see, for example, in the Merchant of Venice, when Portia is waiting for a husband, she cannot at once marry uh, a man of her choice because her dead father from under the grave has given a condition that anybody willing to take the hands of Portia must first win the casket trial. And Bassanio does it, but there is a little, a little underhand play uh, on the part of Portia to enable Bassanio to pick up the right casket. But here, this dominance, male dominance, patriarchal dominance in the form of a father or in the form of a husband was very much an issue in Shakespeare's time. Women were marginalized, women were denigrated, and they were, you can say, under suppression by this male dominance. But then there are like rebellious characters. Cordelia is one. Desdemona herself is also a rebellious feminist because she violated all the norms of Venice to marry Othello. And and then uh, so love therefore in every situation in 12th night for example, love becomes a complicated thing because uh, of the disguise and Orsino cannot marry Olivia at once. Okay, so then other two things are which are connected with the love comedies are disguise and for disguise one beautiful play is As You Like It. Women wearing the attire of man to act like a man, and in As You Like It, Rosalind she becomes Ganymede. And now the question is, in Shakespeare's time, on the Renaissance stage, the female characters were performed by not by women, but by young boys who had not broken their voice. So all these Cleopatra, Ophelia, Rosalind, Portia, all these great female characters of Shakespeare were originally young boys acting in the female roles. So when Rosalind becomes a man, it means the child actor he already became a woman wearing the disguise of woman, and the woman is wearing a disguise of Ganymede. So the woman then turns into a man, and then here in As You Like, Rosalind says to Orlando that when you are missing Rosalind, okay, let me therefore pretend like Rosalind, and you can speak love talks to me, think, taking me as Rosalind. So Rosalind therefore again is a girl. So a boy turned girl, boy turned boy and turned girl. This young actor had to perform in as many as four roles. Quite a talented actor he was, isn't it? And then here, uh, so love therefore is like this. In one of the sonnets, Shakespeare says that uh, love is always there. Love is always full of conflicts, obstacles. But then he says, true love never admits of any impediments. I have forgotten the line, but the line is like this: true love never really, true love is never, you know, stopped by any kind of obstacle or impediment. Okay, so this is the thing. And then one more thing is the supernatural, the treatment of supernaturalism. One best example is A Midsummer Night's Dream. Though we know that in Shakespeare, in Hamlet and Macbeth, supernaturalism is used because the ghost was a supernatural figure. The witches are supernatural beings. And in A Midsummer Night's Dream, the supernatural world itself forms into a world, beautiful world, where there is a king called Oberon and there is a queen called Titania, and they are not on good terms. Love, in their case, also is not running on a smooth passage. Oberon is unhappy with Titania because Titania is not handing over the Indian child to him. So therefore, he is planning to punish Titania because of her uh, refusal to hand over the boy to him. And what is the punishment? Very beautiful. He has this, and in the temples also there is supernatural Ariel. So he asks Robin Goodfellow, Puck, to collect that love juice. And the effect of the love juice is that when it is rubbed on the sleeping eyes of anybody, and when he or she wakes up, whatever she or he finds around them, they will fall in love with that. Something organic. Okay? They will always fall in love with them. And Titania, she is sleeping. Oberon, as a course of revenge, puts the love juice on her eyes. And Bottom, the most interesting character, the loveliest comic character in Shakespeare is Bottom. Of course, Falstaff is there, but Falstaff and Bottom, they can stand side by side in parallel. Sometimes difficult to judge who is more humorous. Falstaff, I think, is more humorous. So then, Bottom, therefore, uh, is tired. He has come to sleep there. And Puck goes around and Puck puts an ass's head on Bottom. So Bottom is transformed into an ass without his knowledge. And Titania wakes up by hearing Bottom's sounds. He was singing because he was scared in the forest. And therefore he was singing loudly. His loud songs woke up Titania. And then she falls in love with Bottom. This is a beautiful scene. The fairy queen is in love with Bottom, not as a mortal Bottom, a Bottom who has been transformed into an ass. So it's a beautiful, busier kind of scene. And so, the language is so beautiful there. And later on, Bottom says, I have had a dream, and I cannot put it into human language, but I must call it Bottom's dream. Now, Bottom is suggested, the name. He comes from the lowest rung of society, and his name is Bottom. But he has now become the lover of the queen of the fairies. So it's a big, nice. And then uh, this supernatural elements then are there, and then uh, like tragedy like Romeo and Juliet. This this tragedy, Romeo and Juliet, takes place because of certain, let us say, miscommunication and almost fatalistic. Romeo and Juliet in Shakespeare's plays, I think, is the most fatalistic play because of this fatal mistake done by one of the fathers that that caused actually Romeo's death as well as Juliet's death. And in the play within the play, in A Midsummer Night's Dream, this Romeo and Juliet, this play is being reproduced. Or let us put it like this: the tragical version of Romeo and Juliet is put into a comic version in Pyramus and Thisbe. Beautiful. And one more thing is that whatever the theme, if it is in a comedy, Shakespeare can give it a comic treatment. And if it is in a tragedy, then it takes on the tragic treatment. So it is better to say that it is possible by reading Shakespeare's plays to find out parallel themes coming up, overlapping themes. The theme that he had treated in one play had again been treated in another play, almost in the same manner. But with little changes, Shakespeare has continued to build up his canon. And when it is a tragic incident, tragic story, the end is tragic. When it is a happy story, the end is comic. And then about his language, I mean, we have to read out certain passages to show the beauty of his language. Uh, Shakespeare's way of telling things is that, I mean, probably it was the style of the day that when he drops an idea, that idea will be qualified by a series of images, and then he goes on feeding the idea with all these images, so that uh, finally you actually get a number of images to support one single idea. This has been always the style, and then uh, it is also possible because Shakespeare wrote in blank verse. Blank verse means unrhymed pentameter, because Shakespeare wrote in a language which was very much in the middle between poetry and prose. So it is also easy to rewrite the Shakespearean poetry into prose version, not deviating much from his poetry. It's possible. And then uh, Shakespeare uh, is not an idealistic in the sense of always living in the walls of ideas. It is not like that. Shakespeare will make you feel that let us go to the center of the market. Let us sit at a tea stall, hear the people converse, and try to make a story out of them. Always. So if the idea comes, a kind of very sophisticated, high kind of idea like to be or not to be, this idea also is somehow compacted, attached with the world of reality. As some great writers do, without having any contact with the reality of the story, they go on broaching ideas after ideas, like clouds after clouds. It never happens in Shakespeare. He will take us to the highest level of thought, but that highest level is somehow connected with the very basic source of the real life from which that thought has sprung. So therefore, it is very easy from by reading Shakespeare to always travel down to the basic ground level fact, and again to shoot up like that. But what I'm meaning to say is that it is not a kind of philosophical excogitation that you encounter in Shakespeare. No, even his longest speeches, if we think that, say, the speeches by Richard II, there are in the earlier plays there are many long speeches. Even these speeches are modified, uh, repeatedly checked with the factual ground that are the source of the speeches. That is why I like Shakespeare very much. Sometimes I get tired with reading novels, particularly novels where the ideas are occurring just without any attachment to the facts where they have sprung up. It never happens in Shakespeare. This is what I like about Shakespeare. And his language is, I mean, sometimes is so awe-inspiring. And Shakespeare had the courage to coin new words. Okay, and, and then, for example, Shakespeare would write somewhere that a woman is not yet married, and Shakespeare would write an unmarried woman like that. Okay? So this is how I think that we can read Shakespeare uh, to derive the highest kind of pleasure literature can give. And today it is his birthday, his 458th anniversary, birth anniversary, and I pledge my wholehearted respect and compliments to him. And long live Shakespeare. Thank you very much.